Welcome, Robyn Warren, to Dragon Talk. Yay!
Thanks. Hi.
How are you doing?
Doing all right. Making it. It's 2021, and I think we're all just trying our best.
For damn sure.
I feel like it's already. I feel like it's already better.
Yeah.
Yeah, my year so far is better than last year was. What are we? 3 weeks in, so knock on wood.
I mean, there's been at least one pretty major bump in the road, but I feel like we're turning a corner here. We're turning. My dad just texted me and said he's getting his vaccine tomorrow.
Oh, great!
Well, that's awesome.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So that was
exciting.
like I feel uplifted and
Absolutely.
like full of hope. Which is a great time to talk to you, speaking of being full of hope, because of the wonderful things that you do, being the founder and creator of Geek Girl Strong.
Mm-hmm.
Will you tell us a little bit about this mission and what it is you do?
Sure. So I've been trying to get a lot better at telling this story in a nutshell because I was running Geek Girl Strong for 4 years as my side gig before being able to do it full time now for the past few years. But basically, it is a wellness community made up of geeky folks. And it started off, obviously it's in the name, it started off as focusing on people who use she, her pronouns, and it's sort of getting broader and broader as time goes on, but kind of with the roots of understanding that it's a space for a lot of women and girls who didn't find a space in fitness or wellness or even PE class growing up. And that's sort of where it spawned from, was me being a health and PE teacher who was watching a lot of my female students go from sixth graders who would just play and then go to class and do other things to people who seemed to feel like they had to choose if they were going to be a tomboy and be athletic in front of the other kids or be a bookworm who sits out and reads in the stands, or who was like pretty and popular and sociable and like not know that they could be all three or anything else that they could think of. So in realizing that, a lot of women more around my age were like, well, do you train adults? And I said, I can. That's how I got here from being a PE teacher.
That's awesome. What is the, that speaks a lot to me because I was in two camps. Like I was a theater kid and, a nerd and loved all of the fantasy genre, including playing D&D. But I also love basketball and following along with sports and, tried out for as many teams as I could, was on a few track teams and cross-country running teams, and I had a lot of friends who were, athletes in high school and whatnot. And there was always this weird push and pull that as a dude, I didn't understand. I was like, you can do all of this. It doesn't, there's no, categorization. It's not like the Breakfast Club where you're a jock and that's all you are, or you're the miscreant and that's all you are. Like you can be a well-breathed, and that's one of the tenets of Dragon Talk, is trying to show that, we're all full spectrum people, and you can bring all those hobbies into playing games, and you can also still be an athlete and love doing geeky stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I've met people who have gotten older and realized that they were geeks the entire time. It's just something that they didn't talk about too much with their cheerleading team or, whatever the case may be. And I've heard a lot of people reference themselves as a weird athlete, just because they didn't feel like they quite fit in with the kids who were playing Magic the Gathering in the cafeteria or their basketball team, and they were somewhere in between. And I think there were a lot more of us than we realized. We kind of just never talked to each other about it as teenagers or kids.
Yeah. So are you finding that in doing this work that you're able to kind of get those stories, and what are they like?
Yeah. So a lot of the people who end up joining the wellness community are more the folks who absolutely hated PE. And they find that my approach is something that speaks to them a little bit better because I pull in D&D and just RPGs and tabletop games along with working out or eating well and doing those kinds of things. one of the biggest compliments I get is that when people say, if you were my PE teacher, I might have not hated it so much. Which, yeah, thank you for both for having that reaction, because that's like the biggest compliment I could get.
Absolutely.
So, when I was a PE teacher, I would, instead of calling the game Steal the Bacon, we would call it the Hunger Games or the Cornucopia. And I would call them all tributes and like put on this whole show to get them to be more active. But I'm also getting a lot of people who identified as the jock who are like, I would leave home from practice and then spend the entire night playing Final Fantasy. But no one knew that because it's just what I did at home after dinner. And it's been really fun to, like you said, just kind of blow away all of these boxes that we all felt we had to fit into.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much. I've been thinking about this interview probably for like a week because I'm like, I have so many questions and like so many thoughts on this topic. But
sure.
I think one of the things that really stands out to me is like how you said the mission, started with girls and women or people who use she, her pronouns. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, with fitness, it can feel like a community that's hard for a woman to break into. And I think a lot of that could be said for gaming and nerd culture as well. So It's really interesting how you're kind of empowering women and girls and people who identify as such to feel like, no, like this is my community. Like I can do both of these things and I can still present as feminine. And I know that was like 20 years ago, I started at Wizards. And that was really my first foray into gaming. Like I played games, but I didn't, I did not identify as a gamer or a nerd or a geek. And I know that a lot of the women that I encountered during those times felt like they had to hide their femininity to be a part of that community. And I can see a lot of those similarities too, I imagine, with like the health and fitness world as well. So, I mean, I love how you're bringing both of these worlds together and using kind of tenets from both to, show that you can do all of these things.
Yeah.
We can do them all. Yeah. So I guess I don't have a question. I guess that was more just like a really
I appreciate everything
rambling
you said.
statement of just like, this really speaks to me. And I think that the work that you're doing is really important.
Thank you so much. I think the reason why I realized there was something there, like in what you're explaining, is because I was standing in front of a class of 50 kids, because in New York City, it's one teacher to 50 children in the gym, 50.
Jeez. Whoa.
Yeah. So every day, multiple times a day, I kind of had this sample size, right, of kids and like watching how they played and how they worked out and all of these different things and their reactions to me. I'm 5'3.5", and I'm a Black woman, and I wasn't that much older than them at the time when I started teaching. And I cutely would admit that I was taking time off from work to go to New York Comic Con. And if they were good, I'd bring them back some free comics that I get. And, if someone did really well in class or volunteered to lead the stretches, I'd give them a comic book or, I would pull them in and say, tell me about the anime that you're watching. What should I watch? I just got access to my friend's Crunchyroll account or whatever it is. Right. And started realizing their interest in hearing oh, Miss Warren goes to Comic-Con and she goes to the gym and deadlifts on her free time. One, I'm a human who doesn't live under my desk. What? And then two, I have all these interests outside of being a PE teacher. And I think that in general, just the nuance and complexities of humans actually really speaks to people, including our younger people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was just thinking teachers were mystical beings. Do you remember seeing a teacher out in the wild, at the grocery store or at the mall, and you'd be like, Miss Jensen,
you're
grocery
here?
shops? She eats spaghetti? This is amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I love that you're normalizing, yeah, I go to Comic-Con. Yeah, I read comic books.
Yeah.
And we see it, from, I don't know, maybe just even with my own two daughters, like just watching something like Marvel movies or Star Wars or things like that have, thankfully been showing a lot more women in these badass, very strong, athletic roles. And I think back, 30 years ago, there were some of those, but you didn't really see it. And it was this fringe thing. And for them, it's completely normal to see a badass, heroine doing amazing things. And they're even at the point now where they're like, oh, wait, there's only 2 girl Avengers? Like, they just had that conversation like a couple of days ago. Like, that's not cool. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That is not cool. But also, like, I like that they're showing a progression. Like, even in the last, 10 years of all those Marvel movies, it started off with very male-centric, and it's realizing that there is much more of an audience for people who identify with as feminine to see themselves, and it's something that Dungeons and Dragons is really, really embracing, and I hope we'll embrace more, that, the embodying of yourself in these roles can be uplifting, not just in your psyche and mental health, but just in your health, in, fitness and embracing the fact that, like, Cheetos during a game is great, but Cheetos all the time is not a great idea, and that type of stuff. And I don't know, I just love seeing it. And I don't have a question either. I'm just,
we're just really excited.
I thought I was leading up to a question.
This is the easiest interview. You didn't actually think this was like an interview.
We could just keep talking.
No, the one thing I did want to ask was, how can, people who are listening to this, kind of take what you're saying and bring it into their own lives, right? Like, rather than, because many of them are not PE teachers or have this ability to do this. How do you think people can get involved?
So I guess I have to start by saying is that Geek Girl Strong, the community will always welcome you. But aside from like our small bubble, in general, the things that people can do in their everyday life, I have this claim to fame, which is I have a 3-month program where I take 5 geekies people and we do a health coaching program with those 5 people. It's like a semi-private situation. And one of those teams, we call them teams, we've had 9 of them. Team 3 actually ended up finding their D&D like party after my program. Nice. So that, like, I was like, I can retire. I'm done. It's been great. I've done everything I wanted to do. So they don't play as much right now, but when they were still playing, they would like loop me in on their group text every once in a while and let me know how it was going. And one of the really big things was challenging themselves to find snacks to share with one another as a potluck that were a little more what we call nutritionally dense rather than caloric or calorie dense. So, someone made like I think it was chickpea cookie dough, something wild.
Yeah.
I didn't want to believe in it, but I tasted it and it was great. Yeah. Rather than like only having pizza at every single game night. And like sometimes you do have pizza at game night, but other times like having these options that they can choose from have been really great and really fun for them to be like, I'm bringing this week and showing off this new thing to their friends. And then getting to feed everyone while you become someone else is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, like you said, and I've listened to the podcast and I know that you've just touched on like how much role playing can mean to people. And so connection is super important. And that's something that I'm admitting to myself more and more is that as much as humans like to pretend we're so tough, we desperately need each other. Like, to my chagrin, like I'm not excited that we need each other this badly, but I think the last year has proven to us how badly humans need human connection to one another. And watching that particular team, that group, become friends and then become deeper friends because they're role playing together has been like one of the joys of my personal and professional life.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
And again, I think there's, again, similarities to, I mean, obviously you know this because you're kind of basing your whole business on it, but like the community of, you know, like your supportive health and fitness community and your D&D community. And we've seen that in the D&D community, like the hashtag D&D fitness, like people really, they get excited and like about the challenges because hello, we're gamers and give us a quest, we'll do it.
Exactly.
But the thing that I also love seeing is the support that they will give each other. Also like your D&D party, you know, like everyone's accomplishments kind of elevates the whole group. So you celebrate each other's, you know, their victories as well. So after hearing you tell that amazing story, I feel like, well, of course they would become a D&D party after. I mean, like they kind of were a D&D party to start.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
What a great way for them to maintain those connections. It's great.
Yeah.
So are you a dungeon master by chance?
I am not. I am
interesting.
So intimidated. I am so impressed by anyone who ever does it. And I think I enjoy sitting back. I probably like do a lot of the DMing in my real life with Geek Girl Strong. That I think it's really enjoyable for me to be like, I'm along for the story.
I ask because hearing you talk about when you were a PE teacher and instead of calling it capture the flag or whatever, you were like, it's the Hunger Games, because that seems like a dungeon master skill, like knowing your audience, kind of meeting them where they're at. Like, okay, like this, like a dungeon master is really good at knowing what their party wants and what's going to excite them and what's going to resonate with them. And that's like a skill that I could see a dungeon master employing, and you know, picked up on that.
Maybe I should try it. Like you might have convinced me a little bit. I'm very intimidated by the idea.
I am too. I totally get that.
But like all that I do with Geek Girl Strong is take these like nerdy or geeky themes and make workouts and make recipes and like do all of these things. That's a big part of the Patreon. But and the monthly events that I host. So like every month, this month, we're still in January. Yes. Time is an illusion right now.
Right.
In January, the theme was mythology. So the workout, I based it on the 12 tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, cool.
So, you know, and then we had a virtual dance party that we have every month during the colder weathers here in New York, where it's just like anyone can come. Anyone of any pronouns or any gender. That's why I kind of said it's starting to like branch out. But it was also mythology themed. So I created a 2-hour playlist that had like songs from Disney's Hercules, but also just like pop songs to dance to that have the theme in it.
Walk Like an Egyptian, was that in there?
I went there.
That one was not in it, but we had... Geez, I can't remember the name of half of the songs anymore because it was a few weeks ago. But we had lots of songs like that for sure.
Nice.
And, you know, people dressed up at home as different gods and goddesses or mythological figures. So I am doing a lot of the like, I know that these people like this thing, and here's how I'm going to get you to exercise. You're going to dance for 2 hours at home.
In cosplay.
And cosplay, you know, while we talk about how this song is some nymph calling Hera, telling her that her husband's cheating on her again.
Oh, man. Yeah, I didn't even think about it, but myth is such a great topic because it's all about feats of strength and, you know, the trials of Hercules and all these things, right? The Olympics itself, right?
All the things.
Yeah. There's a wealth of there. And then of course there's all the Magic the Gathering, Theros themed adventures that you can go on and make that happen.
Exactly.
Very fun. So I have a question, because you mentioned how, like, you know, Shelly enjoyed having the lifting up of the D&D fitness and stuff. And I'm one of those people who, when I exercise, I don't want other people around me. I don't want to be talked to. I don't want people wanting me to talk. Like I'm sweating and gross, and I just want to try to forget that I'm
solitary
doing
sport for
anything.
Yes.
So what are ways that someone like me, who might be a little bit more of an exercise introvert, can take, still get some benefits out of a community like Geek Girl Strong?
Sure. So one of the things that came out of COVID times is the Geek Girl Strong Discord server that's attached to Patreon. So there are some people who are just like, I don't want to see any of you. I don't ever come to events, or even people who are like my private clients. And I try to encourage them to come to events, and they're like, they try to be polite, and they're like, sure. And I know they're not going to come. So, there are people who are involved to completely do their own thing, but just want some accountability or support when they're having a hard day, which there are many of, in life, but also lately. So people do that. And then I host an online challenge called the One Up Wellness Challenge every year that's coming up in February. And it's individual. I send everyone emails once a day for 7 days, and you do everything on your own. So one of the themed days that comes to mind is our RPG day that we did last year, where it was an entire workout and you had to roll dice in order to know how many of each movement you were going to do, kind of thing.
Nice. Oh, that's cool. I like that. So you're not having to worry about anyone else than this disembodied voice who's emailing you like these goals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that, the disembodied voice.
You can even make that a character, like it's the skull of Vecna that's giving you these things, and you have to go do it.
Exactly.
Now I'm giving you ideas.
So yeah, I email, and then there's XP challenge, HP challenge, and MP challenge, which is XP is exercise or physical activity. And then the HP challenge is a nutrition challenge, so a food challenge of the day. And then MP is your mental health challenge of the day. So
what are some of those that you've been working on for the mental health challenges? That's interesting.
Yeah, so sometimes it's things like doing a body scan, which is just like a meditative exercise where you scan your body while sitting or laying down to see how you're feeling and to check in with yourself. Other times it's literally like write a letter to yourself in a year from now, or something like anything like that. Anything that allows for people to take a moment. 1 year, which always makes me laugh to think about, because my mom usually does the challenge. I'm an only child, and she does everything that I do.
That's cute.
There was one time where it was like, take a really good shower or bath, and then really take your time putting on your moisturizer all over your body after. And I was like, oh, great. Hi, Mom. It's a good activity to do. You're taking care of yourself. She doesn't care, but felt a little bit awkward for me, the kid. So it's everything from like buy yourself something that's like really inexpensive, but makes you happy. Like if you're at the store, one of those little things that's at the checkout counter, or buy yourself flowers, like anything, all the way to things that are like meditate. Or there's one time where it's just stretch. Like reach for your toes. Make sure you can still do that.
I need to do that.
Still do that. Make sure and work towards that.
So lots of different things. And then the nutrition ones are never specific, because I don't try to pretend that I know everyone's relationship with food or what they need. So it could be really simple things, which people find helpful in general, like chew the food in your mouth before loading your utensil with your next bite if you're a fast eater. That is my biggest tip for fast eaters, or for people who are like, in this case, who are playing D&D and not paying attention how fast they're eating, is to put your food down in between bites. Or if you can't, because you don't want to make a mess, chew the food before you like load up the next bite. It slows you down. It helped me a lot.
Yeah. Because
that's a big one.
The mastication is actually super important for digestion, and so much of what people feel if they're like, oh, I don't feel as good, it's just, oh, well, you got to chew more, bro.
And Exactly. And it takes your body more than a second, a while to know that it's had enough.
Yeah.
So if you just keep eating and eating, that's why, people tend to overeat by accident, especially when they're doing something else.
I try to use that on my kids too. I'm like, all right, just like, you can have seconds, but give it a second, sit, drink of water, tell me about your day. And then before I know it, they're up and doing something else and they're not hungry at all. I'm like,
not
okay,
even
good.
hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good dadding.
It doesn't always work, trust me.
Very impressive. I love the idea of using XP, HP in your practice. Are there other like geeky gaming RPG things that you pull into the real world when you're coaching people?
I would say that the one that people use the most, it's still related to this, but in a little bit more detail, is the MP part, the magic points. We tend to talk about that one more than any of the other ones. And I think that's just because, one, people are happy to have a space to talk about mental health in. So we're not just like, you need to exercise, you need to eat well, but the foundation of all of that is how your head is doing. Because if that's not going great, the other things probably aren't either. So the way that we use magic points or that analogy is to say that like you need to do things to take care of yourself, to build up your MP so that you can impart your magic on the world. And if you just keep throwing out magic over and over again, you're going to have nothing to give. And then, you're probably going to take on an exhaustion point. And then everything else that you do is going to be at a disadvantage. And then, like the analogy just keeps going.
You're going to roll
so
one.
It's like, exactly. Or even if you roll a 20, that might not be the thing that you get to use because you weren't taking care of yourself in other ways. So you might have access to this great stationary bike at home, but if you don't, create time and space and energy around using it, you're never going to get on the thing. So our analogy with that stuff goes pretty far usually.
That is really good.
That is good.
I've been using a stationary bike while playing video games.
That's excellent. I love that.
The only thing that's been able to be like, all right, yeah, no, I can go do this. And obviously it's Seattle, and so it's very wet. And usually we would be able to go outside and exercise, but that's not always an option. So we splurged and got a bike. And then I put it right near where the video game system was. And I'm like, wait a second, I can do this. And then I'm running away from zombies, and I'm like going faster and not even realizing it.
That's awesome.
And it's been really great to do like an hour, sometimes 75 minutes without even really realizing it.
Yeah.
So what?
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm interested because I try to create an athletic challenge in a D&D session, and I ended up doing a jumping thing where there was like basically like pillars, and the character was trying to jump from one to one to get to a treasure at the back. And I was struck because I was like trying to search. I was like, oh, what are some athletic challenges? And nothing came up that really felt like it modeled what I wanted, which was like a heroic feat like Hercules, that type of stuff. So have you had any experience with trying to come up with stuff, not taking D&D and modeling it in the real world, but taking the real world and trying to model it into D&D? Maybe that's more of a dungeon mastery type thing, but have you had any experience in any of the games that you've played in that have been like, oh man, this is something that I can use in Geek Girl Strong?
Oh yeah. So like when we were meeting in person, especially, so my first D&D character was a monk elf named Renlin, and she was a little bit of a klutz. It was one of, her downsides. So it was very funny. She could do all these really cool things, but every once in a while she would like trip on her own feet while trying to do a cartwheel to impress a girl. It was this whole thing. But
sounds like did you roll a 1 when you did your acrobatics?
Yeah, I sure did.
Yeah.
I sure did.
That's great.
So I would take those kinds of things, and when we were meeting in person, especially for Geek Girl Strong events, I would be able to like set up an entire room with cones and different things like that so that people could jump from one space to the other and create an entire storyline with it. So there was one workout where I was like the workout master. And we actually did this online for our RPG themed workout. So I rolled every single one and gave them the list of movements they had to do. So they weren't rolling on their own. I was rolling everything for them. And then the movements led them through a storyline. So like first you wake up and you're on the ground and you realize that there's someone there to attack you. So they do like sit-ups with punches to start. And then they do tricep dips as if they're like pushing themselves up on a chair to get up. And then they do squats and kicks when they're standing. And it like led them through this entire story of like eventually running away. That was really fun.
That is fun.
I get excited about that kind of stuff.
That's really cool. And it can work both ways. Like a lot of times people equate exercise with like, I don't want to like something negative, bad. Like it's too much. It's hard work. They think like I have to go to the gym, which also can suck. I have to get on a treadmill and I have to run. And if I'm not like doing something that I hate, then I'm not exercising. And you often forget that like, hey, if you like taking a walk, like that still is exercise. If you like dancing, that is still exercise. Rock climbing, like paddle, like whatever it is that you enjoy. So like, I'm wondering if, and I think, Greg, we talked to Jay Tallsquall a little bit about this when we were talking about D&D fitness. Yeah. It's like, if there are people who maybe feel like resistant to the idea of exercising, if like can you do it in character? Can you do it as like, if you're a rogue, like you got to practice your squats. Why? Because you're going to be crouching down a lot. So, okay, like, you know, walk in a squat position, like across your living room, like you're like trying to get underneath a window or something. Or if you're a wizard, then, you know, practice throwing that fireball. Like take a can of soup and just like do this movement, 10 times or whatever.
No, absolutely. You're totally right. And I've had conversations with more in terms with like one-on-one clients, because we have more time to like dig into things about like what class inspires you the most or what kind of character inspires you the most. So like I've had clients who aren't used to moving aggressively. If I'm teaching them how to do a deadlift, I'm like, you cannot do this gingerly. You need to like have a little force behind it to pick up this weight. And then we'll talk about like, okay, you have to tap into your barbarian because the soft stuff is not working. We need you to rage out right now.
Yes.
So, that's been super helpful. And then if like thinking about a monk, being like, all right, we need to work on agility and we need to work on dexterity and we need to work on all of these different aspects of your character. So we don't use the terms as much just because if people need it, I do it, but it could like get really big.
Yeah.
The kind of sheets that I use with my clients to track their progress are called their character sheets.
Nice.
And so we tend to use the XP, HP, MP along with like things that you said. So that was really good.
And what I love about that is because, especially like the crouching or doing these motions that like model what your character is. Next time you're role playing that character, at the table, not exercising, you'll have this like muscle memory of what it feels like.
Absolutely.
To do these motions. Obviously, you're never going to, feel what a fireball from a wizard actually feels like, but like just having the idea of, oh yeah, this is not that weird from taking a shot in a basketball game or running as fast as I can, doing sprints. Like that's what it feels like when you're describing events in a D&D game. And I don't know, I love that because it just makes the role play that much more visceral.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your monk. I love this half elf monk that you were describing.
Brenlin.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to play her as much lately because this group doesn't meet anymore, but I miss her a lot. She's an orphan, doesn't know her parents. So she was left at the monastery when she was a toddler. And she never got to learn how to speak her own language, but she can write, she can read in it, all of those things very well. But the way that we would explain it is every time she would meet another elf, is she would try her best, but it would come off like if someone were speaking Spanish and they would go like, hola. because they just don't have the accent. They've never heard it to know how to use the letters and words that they have. So she's very sincere. She's, like a teen. She started growing out her hair for the first time ever during the campaign. So she was like learning what her hair looked like. She had her first crush during the campaign. She rarely ever used weapons. She loved using her fists. Very big fan of jumping off of things and kicking and punching very quickly. She was the kindest little firecracker in my life. And I feel very strongly for her.
Yeah.
And I miss playing her a lot. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All that. I want to start a campaign with that character in mind. It just seems like there's so many stories to be told there.
Yeah, her background was a secret. Only the DM and I know. The rest of the group doesn't know. I don't think they'll listen to this, but I'm still not going to say it because it didn't get to come out yet.
Right?
Like we didn't get to that part of the story.
You'll get there. You'll be able to get back together one day, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. So yeah, she is a lot of fun to play, and it was the first time that I really got to flesh out a character because I was one of those girls who like didn't have other people to play D&D with growing up.
Right.
And I always wanted to. So I ended up playing a lot of RPG video games as an only child, who didn't have conversations with other friends about these things really. Lots of card trading, because people brought that to school, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering and all of those things, and Pokemon originally. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have other kids to play D&D with. And I got older and one group tried to start and then it fell apart very quickly. So we never even got started. So it was only as an adult that I finally, only child dreams, I finally got to get together with other people.
That's great.
Who had exposure to it through older siblings or things like that. And I finally got the opportunity. So I think I kind of ran with it with Ren.
It's very similar to my story because I was always fascinated, always loved Dungeons & Dragons, read a lot of the books, and was always like, I'm going to find this group sometime. And maybe it was actually something similar to what we were talking about at the beginning of this interview about not knowing where my place was when I was in middle school and not knowing, a lot of I love my friends to death, but they were never really into it. I tried to get them into it and they were like, this is kind of silly. And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of silly. At the time, because I didn't know what I was doing either. I was trying to dungeon master. And so things would start and sputter out and fall apart. And I tried to meet older kids who were playing and, that didn't work for various reasons. And it wasn't until I got to New York City, actually. And I realized that also I had a religious upbringing. And so that was always not encouraged. And it's hard to get dropped off at a kid's house when you're like, can I go? I'm going to kill some demons. They're like, wait, what? So I realized that, hey, and I'm an adult. I'm in the biggest city in the world, or at least, in my world. And I'm sure there's people who play D&D here and found online communities. And
so many.
I really had that awakening with a half-elf character, actually. Was a ranger, and I had played that campaign for 2.5 years, and everything kind of took off from there. So, yeah, it's a hard thing to navigate, especially in adolescence and growing into adulthood, is finding your people. And it's so cool that's what a big part of what Geek Girl Strong is finding people of like mind, while also hoping to add some fitness and athleticism to what they're doing.
I always like to, if there are any teenagers listening, I swear you're both out there. You just haven't found each other yet, because all of the adults in the Geek Girl Strong community, we look at each other and sometimes we're just like, where were you? I needed you. I needed you at 15. And because some of us were both in Brooklyn, but we just didn't know each other. And I hope it's comforting for a 15-year-old out there who might be listening to know that there are these people who are now getting to experience what we wish that we could have when we were younger. And I think that's why things like Geek Girl Strong work, because we're like, oh, you have been here. It wasn't just me who like, I don't know, wanted to run track, but also go home and play Mario Kart all night. You know, and it's been really cool. I'm very fortunate for the community. I lead it. They have done so much more for Geek Girl Strong than I ever could have, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely important for the teenagers to find their people. I mean, that's just such a formative age and you need that support, but it's just as important for adults, and it's harder for adults to find that community and make those friends because, you know, we're not, especially, you know, if we're remote, but even when we weren't remote, like most of the people I met and became friends with as an adult are people that I went to work every day with. Like that's the equivalent of school, basically. But for a lot of adults that don't have that, you know, it's hard. It's hard to make those friends and those connections. And fitness and community and D&D can certainly be that bridge for those people.
Yeah, I think, you know, we forget that there's a reason why people like CrossFit so much. And it's not just because it's a crazy workout, right? Like they like, and I used to be one of those people, not coming down on the CrossFit community. I first started being able to weightlift because of CrossFit, because it was a community of people who included women who were learning how to lift heavy. I never had anybody teach me. I only started in my mid-20s and I'm in my early 30s now. So like, I also like, I forget to mention that, but I like for people to know that like, I was not always weightlifting because I never had anyone teach me. It's the same thing with like, I never had a D&D party because I never had anyone to have one with. But given the opportunity, it really helped me in a lot of different ways. But we forget that like people like playing D&D because it's really cool to role play, but it's really cool to role play with other people. And people like CrossFit because it's really cool to do all of those athletic things. But we go to CrossFit to do them because sometimes it's cool doing them with other people. And I think there's just a lot that overlays between the fitness or even like jock community and the nerd community. I mean, the biggest cosplayers are sports fans, but I could go into an entire rant about how it's all the same.
Yes. And fantasy, like any fantasy sport, like I'm the commissioner of my baseball league. Well, I'm an elf, so you know what?
Exactly. It's all
we're
the same.
kind of the same, buddy.
We're all just fans of something, and that's why, like, when I think of the word fandom, I include sports fans.
Yeah,
I include all of it because we're all doing the same thing in actuality.
And sometimes a sports fan is take it even beyond the fandoms around.
Absolutely.
Other things out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good
There
analogy.
is a lot of similarities. I keep thinking like, okay, so for people who want to maybe get into fitness, but it's daunting and it's hard and maybe it seems too big to just jump into. I think maybe people might have similar feelings about D&D, like if you don't know what it is, you might think, it's a lot of rules. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of people. I don't want to roll. I don't want to like very similar perceived barriers to both. But I mean, you're kind of hearing you talk. Hopefully people are realizing like, oh, like, baby steps, or there's lots of, it can be fun. You can actually like, make this be a great experience. But what advice would you give people who want to start on their fitness journey, for instance, or just start making some healthier changes and feel very overwhelmed by that process?
Choose one thing. It doesn't have to be one thing from each area of health, just one thing that you feel really confident about doing. So I always ask clients like, all right, we set this really big goal. How confident do you feel that you're going to be able to unlock this achievement between a 1 and a 10? 10 being you're super confident about it, and 1 being like, this is not going to happen. Because the biggest thing that I have found and I realized this watching middle schoolers fail at games a lot, because that's what happens when you're learning a new game as a kid. If you don't give people a chance to succeed at something, there's no reason that they're going to want to ever do it again. So the kid who can't get the ball in the hoop, You gotta give them something else to be good at in the game, or else they're never gonna want to play games with other kids. Why would they? They only know the feeling of failure. Everyone needs to feel a feeling of success to get the reward system going in their brain, so they'll want to do it again. So same thing with adults. If you keep setting up this workout goal, I'm going to work out for an hour, 4 days a week, and you keep failing at it, you're just going to keep feeling bad about working out 4 days a week for an hour.
Right.
It might feel bad about yourself too, but you're definitely, and this is what all three of us have been saying, is like, people hate these things for a reason. It's not out of nowhere. So give yourself the opportunity to succeed before anything else. So it's baby steps, yes, but make sure that baby step is something that you can actually succeed at. So your brain goes, oh, this is a nice feeling. I did a thing. And then you'll want to do it again. And when that thing becomes pretty easy for you, that's when you add on a new thing. If you take on too much and you fail at any of it, it's going to feel real crappy and like justly. That's how brains work.
Yeah. That's so funny because I saw a tweet from a contributor to a new book that's coming out, Candlekeep Mysteries, Amy Vorpal, and she said something about writing, which is basically the exact same thing, which is like something that's imperfect but done is way better than something that is just never done. Like if you never work at something, if you never do anything, you know, that's not an end goal that anybody would be happy with. But even if you do, like, be okay with failure, or be okay with setting up smaller goals, or at least that small dopamine release in your head, so that when you get something, it feels good. Not, oh, well, I didn't do, 70 minutes on the bike and then lift. I guess I'm a failure. Like, no, do 10 minutes. I mean, even just, my little thing about biking on while playing video games. Like, I try to do it every day, but I was like, I'm not going to set a time goal. I'm just going to do it for as long as I can. I started with like 20 minutes, started then 30, and then I just kept working up, just like you did. And that's just made the mental leap of wanting to exercise so much less of a burden.
Yeah. And when you talk about failing, a phrase that I really like, and I got it from a book somewhere, so it's not my idea, but I can't remember the author right now, is to fail better each time. Like, you're gonna fail again, but taking whatever information you have from the last failure and making it a better failure next time is better than never doing the thing at all.
My daughter said something that she learned in school. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes progress. And I was like, that's right. Like, it is true.
Profound.
Like, you feel better, right? You're just
it's very
you're getting
insightful.
a little bit better
better,
at something every time you do it. So make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Robyn, I gotta say it. That's feeling real dungeon mastery again, because again, like, I've talked to a lot of dungeon masters, and it seems like they're always trying to find success, like ways for the party to feel successful, especially when you're learning D&D. You don't want people to go in and like kill their character right away. Like, let them succeed so they can feel like what that's like to contribute, especially, know what their strengths are. And again, I'm going to
tell you the reason why I'm so intimidated. I'm going to tell you why. 3 DMs that I've worked with in my life created their own stories. And it wasn't until the 4th one that I had someone who was reading the books and then embellishing. So I have had too many experiences of watching people create their entire world rather than doing it from the book and then adding on your own things a little bit here and there.
Bar's too high?
It was set too high. And that's exactly what we were talking about. I set myself up for failure, so I didn't try.
I appreciate that so much.
Well, then maybe
that was the same. I mean, even just I wanted to be a writer at one point, and I wanted to create a fantasy thing, just like J.R.R. Tolkien did. And then I looked at his notes and the Silmarillion and all these languages that he made up, and I got it in my head, even as a young kid, that I was like, I have to have maps and legends and another language made up. I'm not a linguist. I didn't know how to make up a language when I was, 11. So guess what? Never actually did any of it because it was too high of a bar. And what's fun about dungeon mastering a homebrew, because I've been doing that recently, really for the first time, where I've had a long-term campaign that has been all stuff that I've made up. I don't prepare any of it. I've got some vague ideas of where I'm going to go in my head. I spend some time making a map. That's about it. I don't know what's on the map, and I'd make it all up while playing. Usually, I mean, sometimes I'll have some things in my head that I want to have happen, but guess what? The players don't do what I expect them to do anyway. So even the stuff that I've made up, I'm like, I guess they're not going to really go that way. All right, well, why did I spend all that time making it? It's all about creating it in the moment, and it's been a lot more freeing for that type of stuff. And then, of course, taking stuff from the books is a completely valid way to play, because nobody, not everyone has that crazy mind of those first 3 dungeon masters that you had that can map everything out, right? And those people are awesome, and more power to them. But,
or the time to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, take it. And Shelley's totally right. It's not that dissimilar from the way that you're talking about leading this group, leading 50 kids. Like, anybody who can lead 50 kids in a game, you're basically dungeon mastering.
You can dungeon master. Yeah. What I have also learned about homebrew is, because I aspire one day to be a dungeon master, but I am so scared. I just feel too responsible for everyone's good time, and I don't want people to not have fun. But what I've learned about the homebrew stuff is that if you create your own world, and you mess up rules, which is what I'm kind of concerned about, you can just be like, well, that's how it works in my world.
Do you have to use that tone of voice
you
too?
You have to talk like that.
Yes.
Well, that's how it works here in Shalania.
Shalania.
You're just creating a nice cushion for your failures.
Yeah. Also good to know, you all are starting to convince me. I'm a little closer than I was at the beginning of the interview.
Nice.
Normally, I would say, don't be a dungeon master. Like some of us are just meant to be players, and that's great. But I feel like with you, I just have a sense that I think that you would be a really good dungeon master, and it would be a shame to not explore that side.
Second biggest compliment. First, I wish you were my PE teacher. 2, you can be a DM.
I wish you were my dungeon master.
I wish you were my dungeon master. I like that.
I wish you were my dungeon master.
And then that brings it all together. That is the compliment.
That's perfect. Well, this has been so wonderful speaking to you, Robyn, and getting inspired. I feel like I'm going to go work out after this.
I hope I gave some good information.
You definitely did. I think the most important thing we can take from this is that fitness can be fun.
Yes.
And find the thing that you just naturally enjoy doing and just do it. Because exercise isn't just running in place on a treadmill.
And food that is good for you can taste good as well. They lied to us about Brussels sprouts, and I will never stop talking about it.
Brussels sprouts got a real raw deal. They're delicious.
They're so good when you just put fat and salt and pepper on them.
All healthy things that you have to add to it. No, but
you need all of those things.
Stir frying a Brussels sprouts with some caramelized onions. It's actually one of my favorite things.
It's so good. Yeah. They lied to us.
They lied. Same thing with roasted
really
broccoli and cauliflower.
All of it.
My wife's been putting
said it yesterday.
Everything seasoning over all of it with some olive oil, put it in the oven, and it's like candy vegetables.
It is. It really is, especially broccoli when it gets real crispy on the ends. Oh, so this is definitely nerdier than talking about D&D right now, by the way. I just love that little crispy broccoli.
Well, there's a reason why so many fantasy authors describe the foods that are on the table.
The morsels.
Yeah, right. Well, Robyn, hopefully we've inspired people to jump in and start doing some of this stuff on their own. But if they want to participate in Geek Girl Strong, what's the best way for them to kind of look up and find out more?
So geekgirlstrong.com is the best way. Signing up for our newsletter will make sure that people don't miss anything, like the signups for the 1-Up challenge that's coming when I am your health coach for a week, and it's pay whatever you can. So it's donation based. You can pay me $0 and I will still be your health coach for a week. And then at Geek Girl Strong on Instagram, and I'm trying to get better at Twitter. It makes me real anxious, but I'm trying to do it.
Cool.
Well, hopefully
it's like DMing. Like, then don't be there, just don't worry about it.
That is true.
Oh, and the Patreon is like the biggest thing for internet folks. Since we can't meet in person, it's just patreon.com/geekgirlstrong. And you can join our online community and get lots of rewards that are all very geeky.
XP
And you have a
MP.
podcast too?
I do. It's the Healthy Geek Academy. And we were on a little bit of a hiatus around the holidays, but a new episode about therapy where I interview a therapist is coming out soon.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Excellent. Can't
If
wait.
you need any recommendations for therapists, we have talked to many wonderful therapists on Dragon Talk that use D&D as part of their therapy. So,
Yeah, this person did as well. So I wonder if it's the same person. We should talk about it.
maybe.
Whoa, there's intermingling happening. I love it.
Whoa, crazy.
Well, you're doing great work,
you're
Robyn,
amazing.
and thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having
being
me. This
here.
was a lot of fun.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Yeah, this was great. I feel very inspired. And again, we love and appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much.